Hello and welcome. This is Business Breakthroughs Podcast. My name is Alvin Jong, your guest host for this introductory episode. I'm an average working class father from Australia who loves a great conversation. It is an honor to be given this opportunity to host today, taking me one step closer to my dream of having my own podcast sometime in the near future. On today's episode, we have our guest. I'll be interviewing the usual host of this podcast, Diane Fulmer. She's the founder of the Fulmer LLC, a marketing agency offering book editing, copywriting, and consultation services. So busy business owners can bring their authentic stories to their audience to connect, build relationships, and increase their sales. In the description box or show notes, you'll find some links to connect with Diane. If you want to sponsor an episode, please reach out. Thank you in advance for your support. This is an interview style podcast where we talk to business owners about their origin stories and lessons learned. You'll get to realize you're not alone, and we've all been there at some point. Subscribe and turn on the notifications. Comment below and let us know your thoughts on this episode. With that out of the way, let's get started. Hi, Diane, and welcome.
Hi there, Alvin.
How are you doing?
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Thank you so much for being my guest host for this episode.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for trusting me.
Yes, I really appreciate this so that way I don't have to talk to myself in the intro episode. I was afraid I would have to do that.
I think that's a wise move, Diane.
Yes.
So maybe we'll start with that. Tell us about what Business Breakthroughs podcast is about.
Well, I mean, kind of like it says in the introduction, Business Breakthroughs with Diane Fulmer is an interview style podcast where we talk with business owners about their origin stories and their lessons learned. And it's a conversation for business owners to hear other entrepreneurial paths and realize they're not alone. And we've all been there at some point. Entrepreneurship can be really isolating. You work really hard, long hours. People around you don't always understand what you're doing. Sometimes you question what you're doing, and there's ups and downs. A lot of business owners tend to seek solidarity and community. And this is just a chance for them to hear from other business owners and realize that they're not alone.
It sounds like it's a felt experience of yours.
It is. The past couple of years are when I started my business. I had many years in the corporate world, and then I made that leap, and it's been quite an experience and a lot of time alone. But then also, I found a lot of communities and coaching programs, masterminds, and I just really appreciate the feeling of being with other people who understand what you're going through and they're going through some of the same things. There are some common threads of what people go through, and that's part of what we talk about.
hmm So, what inspired you to start this podcast?
I was inspired to create business breakthroughs during my copy brief calls. So I'm a copywriter and an editor, as we mentioned. People who don't like to write hire copywriters. So
Mhm.
I always found that I got the best information when I had a call with someone and we just talked about their business. I asked them a whole bunch of questions and just really got them talking. And I had the best time learning about people's businesses, their origin stories, lessons that they learned, where they are, where they envision things. I noticed that there were some different common threads and really great origin stories and stuff like that. I really felt like it was a complete masterclass in their field that they'd lived
Mhm.
themselves and shared. I thought, well, what if I hit record and we could all connect through these shared experiences?
Mm. Mm. So, what are some of the breakthroughs, maybe if you can name, mistakes that you've learned from others? They've shared the stories and maybe from you that you think will benefit the audience?
In terms of both my business and my podcast, so I've approached them in a couple of different ways. So in my business, I got a nice case of shiny object syndrome and I didn't take enough action. I wanted to learn about everything and I basically became a library. It was only when I started taking more action than learning that I actually made any headway. So when I started this podcast, I decided that I wasn't going to take a single podcast class. I'd listen to some podcasts, but I was gonna figure it out as I went along. Now, did I purchase a course? I did. Have I been through it? I will get there at some point, but for right now, I found the Spotify for Podcasters platform. I noticed that people were posting on YouTube.
Mhm.
For equipment, I did a little bit of research on equipment, but then I tested out my laptop and it works fine for now. I have a basic ring light. And I'm doing it. I'm taking action first. That is something that I wish that I had done more of when starting my business. But now in my podcast, I'm doing that and I'm making more progress than I ever thought that I would. Now I can go back and apply that to my business. So that's pretty
Right, right.
exciting.
It is very exciting. So, what would you say? Progress over perfection sometimes.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So, what's your goal for this year then? Now that you've achieved quite a fair bit on this podcast,
I'm hoping to release at least 12 episodes of this podcast by the end of this year, as long
including this one.
including this episode, Alvin. And as long as there's continued interest, I'm gonna keep scheduling guests into the next year and beyond. So,
That sounds good. That's a good step,
yeah.
first goal to achieve. So then, maybe taking it a bit longer than this year. What is your vision for this podcast in the next 5 years?
In the next few years, besides continuing to release episodes, I want to build a community where business owners can realize they're not alone and we've all been there at some point. Just like I was saying, it can be very isolating when you start a business. And starting a business can be the most extensive personal development project anyone can take on. So it's so
Mm,
important to stay connected to people with similar goals and dreams because, like I said, the people around you may not always understand, but if you can get around other people who are all trying to reach their goals too, then you can really have a lot of success with that.
yeah. You mentioned starting a business and personal development. What have you learned about yourself during this process that you were like, I didn't know Diane is like that?
I originally wanted to be a theater major, and my parents said no because they wanted me to be employable. But I did get involved in theater classes as electives, and I had a hard time with public speaking, but I did like studying radio communication and theater and all of that kind of stuff. And something that's come out in the last year as I've worked on my communication skills more in an effort to be more comfortable talking about my business, for example, and also starting this podcast, is I've rediscovered that part of me that actually has a voice that likes to be heard. I'm
Mhm.
usually the most bookish introvert you will ever meet, but
Right,
actually, I have a lot of fun having these conversations and I have a
right,
lot of fun connecting with people
right.
and storytelling and all of that stuff. So, I've surprised myself in the last year with that for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like you found a part of Diane that's an extrovert, where you thought you've always been an introvert that liked books and write and
Yes.
wow,
Yep.
that's great. That's awesome.
Yep.
Okay, is there anything you want people to keep in mind when they listen to your podcast?
Basically, that every entrepreneurial journey is different, and that's okay. You're a different person. Your perspective, your gifts, your vision, they might all be different. So take what inspires you and leave what doesn't.
Right. So an open mind.
Yeah,
Right.
you'll hear every single biz marketer under the sun say, try this method to make $25,000 in the next 3 months or something like that. They all have different methods. And could some of those methods work? Yes. But you need to stick to your focus. That's where you're going to find success. And where your focus is usually where your unique perspective and gifts and vision all are.
Mhm.
So if you keep getting distracted, that's where that shiny object syndrome comes in.
Which I do have as well.
Yeah. Yes, a lot of different things can be interesting, but if you work on one thing at a time and just sort of like keep that focus.
It's great advice. Great
Yep.
advice. How can people reach you if they want to be a guest on the podcast or a sponsor for an episode?
Oh, I would love to have a sponsor, and always love talking to different guests. So you can reach me at the links, which will be in the show notes and description box below. And you can also email me at diane@defulmer.com.
Sounds good. If you could have anyone on the podcast, let's say someone look at your link and they send you an email, who would you bring onto the next podcast or the next episode?
I So many, like basically all of them, because I feel like everyone has a unique story to tell. Everybody has a journey. I mean, there are common themes in everyone's journey, but also I feel like people have unique aspects to their stories that it's sort of weird that the more specific you get, the more people you connect with it. I think most business owners have something to say that will benefit all of my wonderful listeners, whether they're just starting or whether they've been at it for years. And I usually try to talk to a range of guests. There have been a couple recently that said, well, I'm not quite sure that I'm far enough along or whatever. And I'm like, no, come on, because the whole point of this is so that way we can feel that solidarity at every
Right,
step. Of the way.
right. So it
Yep.
sounds like it's not just the big shots and the people that have made it that you would like to be on the podcast. You would hopefully find someone who is a common person, but he's gone through so many different breakthroughs and built successful business, but just a common average guy or girl. And that sort of guest would be great for the podcast as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. At all the different stages of business, because I really feel that it could benefit people listen. Yep.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
sometimes the common people with great stories to tell that don't have a platform to tell the stories.
yeah, I've been inspired by people who have 400 followers just as much as people who have 4 million.
Well, that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Okay. What is the most inspiring breakthrough stories you have heard? Speaking of being inspired by someone that's got 400 followers.
Yes. And actually, I think I have someone like that also scheduled next month. She's an exceptional speaker and yeah, she's just incredible. All right. I don't want to give too many spoilers. When I saw that you were going to ask me this question, I did make some notes.
Okay.
One, not everyone's journey is your journey. People will try to sell you what worked for them. The truth is that works for you is what works for you. Two, it's important to stay focused and take action. That's something that comes up over and over and over. And yeah, listen to that. Put
Yes.
down the credit card. Do not buy that 10th course. And three, sometimes it really is just a math problem. Now I'm giving away a little bit who this is, but if you listen to the episodes, you'll figure out who this is right away. But sometimes it really is just a math problem, not a woo mindset problem. But the math helps the mindset as well. So if you're thinking no one's ever going to buy my thing, you can look at the analytics and the numbers and go, have I talked to enough people about my thing? Have I run enough ads for this thing? Have I made sure that people are opening the emails? Have I looked at the click through rates? All that kind of stuff. So sometimes it's a math problem and it's not anything that you have to feel bad that they're not buying it. You just have to look at what you can update in your funnel. Number 4, there can be a messy middle in business where, and this actually came up in a couple of interviews. There could be a messy middle in your business where you started to become successful and made some hires, but you still struggle to get the next level higher than that. So success does not mean less struggle, only bigger challenges to overcome. The good news is that you grow too, so you can handle them by then.
Wow. And all these will be featured in future episodes.
Yes, yes. These are all things that I learned from episodes. And then, oh, this one was in my very first interview. Always be grateful, and that's when good things happen. So, having
Yes.
gratitude. Yeah.
Gratitude.
So,
Fantastic.
yeah. So, those are some lessons and breakthroughs that I've heard so far, and I can't wait to share more.
Thank you, Diane. Is there
Yep.
anything else that I should ask you that I haven't covered in this podcast?
I think we've covered a lot, Ellen.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. I think that's a wrap for today then.
Oh, right. You've done a great job, Alvin. Thank you so much again for
No,
guest
you're
hosting
welcome.
for me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and trusting me.
Absolutely.
This has been Business Breakthroughs with Alvin Jong and Diane Fulmer. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, save, share, and subscribe. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.